And now for a panel of perspectives. The title actually of this panel came to me when I thought about the women who I'd asked to be part of it. Because when you think about the words love, lead, learn, repeat, it's a bit of a refrain for how we as women navigate the world around us. And we're blessed today with a trio of exceptional C-suite leaders and avid learners. They're accomplished, their accomplishments are varied, and they are many, but they are no means done racking them up. They're just on their way. And they have learned a few things, right, along the way, and they can laugh about it, which I just love. Every one of them leads with heart. They're all in. You'll feel that. And when you bear witness to the choices they've made in their personal lives and their professional lives, I think you'll be inspired. You'll feel that balance. And today we have women at all ends of the spectrum, from working executives to gloriously accomplished retirees, from women in STEM to women in HR to those on the front lines making a difference. And you're going to see their beautiful faces now pop up on screen. Welcome. And let's dive in. Now, when Mona enters a room, with her comes poise, grace, calm. And when you engage with Mona, you first notice that there are a few words because she's actually listening. She's truly listening. And when she does speak, it's purposeful, it's clear, and there's an inner wisdom that emanates. It's swathed in a layer of youthfulness, I will say, and that's an unusual pairing. And she's no stranger to people, to talent, or culture, or the importance of a brand. She's at the helm of all of this for BMO. She believes in brand, the power of it, and its importance, both at work and in life, and for companies and people. And in terms of her own brand, well, she's a self-proclaimed health nut. She's a helper, an advocate for women, for children, and for her community. And on top of that, she's a real passionate learner and is restless in the pursuit of new skills. And if she's learned something new and interesting, she wants you to know about it too, to pay it forward. Now, I recently ran into Mona in the halls at BMO, and we talked of all things about pleather pants and menopause, completely unrelated, but nonetheless true. And we both agreed that navigating menopause was really, really tough. The brain fog, the changes in your body, all of it. None of it could be offset by a funky pair of pleather pants, sadly. But this is a woman, rather than flame out or trying to deny it, she instead aims to educate others on how to manage it, hits it straight on. And to better appreciate women menopause at work, she programatizes it, she curates the learning and hits the stigma head on. And I just love that. Mona, I was excited to have you as part of the program because while many of us know you as a powerful woman in the C-suite, we don't know how you navigate all that you do as a woman, and I can't wait to hear what you have to share with us. So thank you for being here.
Lori, thank you. I'm so excited, and I just want to shout out what so many others have in the chat. I really appreciate you sharing so candidly and courageously about your own journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I never saw that one coming, I got to say. But here we are, right? I think there's courage in numbers and strength in numbers. So thank you for that. And I want to talk a little bit, Mona, because so often we see highly accomplished, self-motivated women, and we wonder, like, where did it come from? Like, was a seed that was planted and grew when you were young? Was the fire always in your belly? What was it for you, Mona, and where did this drive come from?
It's interesting. I had a mom and a neighbor that lived beside me. My mom was an entrepreneur and had an incredible work ethic and was a volunteer, always doing things in the community. And I think that was a very strong role model to me. And I had a neighbor that drove me to school. And as she picked me up, she always had her hands at 10 and 2. And she always had her head, forward in the car. And she walked fast, talked fast. And I remember so many times how inspired I was by her. Like these encounters with women absolutely shaped me. I think it's also been a reflection on how I want to live my life. And one of the things that I do every year is think about my life as a pie and what the pieces are that are in it. Family, health, friendships, my career, my volunteer work, and reflect on what happened last year. And I've done this since I've been in university. And to me, that reflection has helped determine, am I doing what I want to be doing in my life? I really believe it's important to be thoughtful about how do you want to live your life. And when you start to align things more to things that you are passionate about, alignment of purpose, caring about, the pieces of the pie that are important, maybe it's friendships, maybe it's fitness, etc. And recognizing that if those things are really important to you and you're not tending to them, it will have an impact in some way. And so I've used that kind of visual of a pie to think about the readjustment along the way. It's never perfect. But to me, it's helped me navigate the things that I want in my life intentionally that bring me joy.
I love that. I like the pie. I like the neighbor. I like the holding yourself account, and the constant read on it. It's a great tactic, and it works, obviously. And now I came to know Margaret because I attended a women's event she organized with over 50 women sharing their experiences and helping one another elevate. And I watched her kind of navigate the room with ease and shine light on others, a quality I really just love. And then at this year's Winter Wish, which is our holiday party, we bonded over, of all things, the band U2. And this is before I even knew she was Irish. So you can take the woman out of Ireland, but you can't take Ireland out of the woman. Well, this is a woman who is courageous, who bucks the trend unapologetically and is constantly looking for reinvention. She's no nonsense. She's tough. She's to the point. She graduated with a degree in computer science at a time when there were even fewer women in STEM. She traveled the world and lived in 4 countries and has led technical teams for several years now. She broke ground and continues to champion change and call for courage for the teams that she leads. And now BMO and Salesforce are corporate cousins, and our partnership runs deep and wide because of people like Margaret and the team she's built. And Margaret, to quote U2, it's a beautiful day. And I'm thrilled you're with us.
Thank
now,
you.
Oh, pleasure. And I often find that to understand a woman, you scratch at her roots a little bit and to understand where it is that she came from, who she was raised by, and who her role models were. These are things that shape us, right, as human beings and women. And they're often the yardstick for what tells us that what's possible. So please tell us a bit about you and your background and motivation.
Thank you so much, Laurie, and thanks so much for the invitation to join the group this morning. And thank you to BMO for the phenomenal partnership that we have together. It really is an honor to be here. And so a little bit about me, and I will say that I'm actually going to Dublin tonight, so you truly can never take Ireland out of an immigrant who has a lot of roots and really loves doing that. But I did grow up in Dublin, and for any of you who've been to Dublin, Dublin is not divided by a train track like many cities. Dublin is very much divided by a river. And you either grow up on the north or the south side of the river. And I grew up on the north side of the river, which is the wrong side of the river. And so with very modest means, I was so fortunate to be the first to go to university in my family. And when you grow up in a small island, the world is such a massive place that you're always thinking, well, what else is out there? Which is actually my naive motivation to leave the country pretty fast. So since then, I've had the fortune of living in London, England, living in Pennsylvania, and now I've been in Toronto for 22 years. And that's only because I fell in love with a Canadian that I got to discover this great country. So that's also been a wonderful follow your heart is often a great way to live your life too. But when I think about what drives me, and I love what Mona said about you got to step back and assess every so often, are you living your full life? Are you living with joy? And to me, it's very much grounded in my purpose. And to me, it's about helping others reach their dreams. And that's something that's so important to me. And so I've always worked in enterprise software. And 5 years ago, I had the absolute amazing gift of discovering Salesforce. And I talk about Salesforce as my place where passion and purpose meet. And so my purpose is in helping others realize their dreams. And I'm deeply passionate about women empowerment, about finding first Canadians, new Canadians, their first opportunity in Canada, and also about age diversity across the workforce, because I deeply believe that that's very, very important. So that's what drives me from a sometimes people ask me, if you weren't in enterprise software, what would you be doing? And that kind of leads to one of my lifelong inspirations, is from Christian Amanpour. If I was not in enterprise software, I'd be a war correspondent, because my values are very much trust, kindness, courage, and community. And she's the most courageous woman I know. So that's always been a huge inspiration for me.
Well, I never saw that one coming. I would have done if I wasn't doing this, I'd be a war correspondent. That's one for the quote reel right there. But you mean you're a warrior every day, and there's such strength and inspiration in your movement off the island. Like, way to go. And we're going to explore that a little bit more as the program evolves. And I want to next introduce you to Alex. So I knew Alex, let me just say, by reputation before I ever really knew Alex. Because she left this trail of accomplishments behind her that was astounding. And from being the group head of the U.S. Retail and Business Bank at BMO, to leading the Canadian distribution teams, to being a top woman in banking across the U.S., to achieving record high NPS scores, to studying at Harvard, like, oh my God. As if that wasn't enough, a miracle. Everyone who worked for her or alongside her just seemed genuinely happy when I talked to them. And then I had the chance to work with her myself, as my team provided data and analysis to hers. And I remember it vividly because one of the first things she said to me was actually, what should I be doing differently? Like, what should I be doing differently? And I was disarmed, actually, because of her humility, and intrigued by her question, and liberated also because of the potential for a true partnership. And as it turned out, I had a lot of ideas, and in her, I found a willing partner, and together we just made hay, and we transformed how data was used within our branches and to shape customer experiences and all the rest. And when I asked Alex if she'd consider coming on ElleExcel today, she humbly agreed and said, sure, if you think what I have to say would be of interest. Remember that. And then Alex, so among many other things, is the proud mother of 3 children and 3 grandchildren, a doting dog mother, a devoted daughter, a loyal friend of mine. She's a budding yogi, a passionate traveler, an eternal learner, a role model for what to do when you retire. So keep that in mind too. I'm thrilled to call her my friend. I know she's also a friend to so many people on the line. Welcome back, Alex.
Thanks, Lori. Honestly, I'm getting nervous having you say so many nice things about me, but I do appreciate it very much. And I also want to just congratulate you on this great work with ElleExcel, because I keep thinking of when I started my career, and I was so often the only woman around. And this is such a wonderful community that you're building. So I was just completely inspired by the beginning, and obviously your comments. So thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm thrilled. And I would say there's this fine line between, let's say, inner confidence and humility. And sometimes folks put on an air of, let's say, humility, but you can just feel that sincerity gap, right? You know what that feels like in your stomach. And Alex, to me, you are one of the most real leaders I have ever worked with, and people, frankly, that I have ever known. And there's this inner and outer congruence to how you feel and how you live, like a centeredness. And so where does that come from, if you don't mind my asking? And have you always been this way, or did you evolve to this place?
Well, you've been asking horrible, thought-provoking questions that have plagued me for the last week. So I challenge everybody on this call, like, why are you the way you are? That's a great question to ask, which is basically what you're asking me. But I think it's a combination of things where I grew up, and unfortunately, my dad passed away when I was 9, and I took kind of primary care of my 2 younger brothers. So I would say I've always been a caretaker. And, Margaret, you talked about what you would be if you weren't, at Salesforce. I probably would have been a teacher, because teaching matters to me, or a psychologist. Like, what motivates people matters to me. And so, people, my friends always say, we can't believe you actually ended up a banker. And I just remind them that banking is about people. It's about customers and clients and employees and collaboration in terms of how we all work together to make a business successful. And I think that really motivated me to want to stay in this line of work and what was so fulfilling. It was never really, and Mona probably knows this, never really about the business to me. It was always about the people and how did the people feel and how did the people contribute. And I was never perfect at all of those things, but I definitely strived to make people around me feel valued in terms of what they could contribute to the organization. So, truth and honesty has always mattered to me and been a core value. And I think growing up, you instinctively live your life according to those values. But now, as I've gotten older, and I'm going to talk like the old person on the call here in my retirement, with my label, is you have time to really think about, okay, what really matters? What kind of person do you want to be? And what things do you want to accentuate? And I continue to learn and grow and want to make sure that I continue to show people around me, whoever they are, that they feel valued as well.
Oh, I mean, you're killing it in every respect. And I love that. It emanates from within, right? That's that degree of authenticity. You can't help but show up and be who you are when it's coming from that place. And, Mona, I mean, so many of us are working to get to higher ground and to achieve kind of greater heights, to get to the C-suite and punch through these glass ceilings. And in our minds, we have this idea about what it will be like to arrive, so can you describe to us what you thought it would be versus what it actually is?
Well, I have to say, I had the benefit of Alex was one of the role models. I was in my first executive role, and Alex was one of the most senior women in BMO. And she doesn't know this, but one of the things that really stood out to me is one day, Alex, you came in on a weekend and you wrote cards about all the things that your partners and your team had done. So when they came into the office Monday, that was the first thing they saw. And the buzz that created and the discretionary energy that Alex got out of these people was unbelievable. They would do anything for her. And so I had the opportunity to see these role models that were fantastic, that was very, very inspiring. I think, Lori, to your question, I'll share a few things that aren't different, and then a few things that for me have been watchouts. What isn't different is your self-talk. To me, there's different points when I feel more confident and other times that I feel a real sense of fear and concern about either the work I'm doing or my ability to do it. And that's been the same at different points of career. And that doesn't go away with the big title. You still have that self-talk and that fear. I think that one of the other things is as you get more senior, sometimes you have to work harder to really listen and know what's going on around you. You can get a lot of reports, but information can be maybe more filtered, or maybe the types of people you're talking to change in terms of the forums that you're in. And so being conscious of that, like, how am I taking in information? Who am I around? How can I broaden that circle? And how can I make sure that I'm connected still in different ways? And that's a function of the data that you're looking at and the human interactions. And then I think, busting the biases of moving into more senior roles doesn't mean you're then the only decision maker. The more senior you are, and definitely, as I've had the opportunity to work with CEOs, what I observe is the stakeholders don't go away. You are not the sole decision maker. The complexity of how you work horizontally, how you interact with stakeholders is key. And it can actually be increasingly lonely. As you move into more senior roles, there's sometimes less people you can talk to about the challenges that you have, because you're when you're in the top job, you're the leader to your team and you're the linchpin to the board of directors, but you don't really have a lot of other peers. So finding community can be more challenging, and finding the people you can talk to about sometimes which are really sensitive items is important, because everybody needs advisors and mentors as they're navigating through things. And I think more in the last kind of 5 to 10 years, I think being in senior leadership roles, the critique on social media, and from others, whether you're a high school principal, whether you're a politician, or whether you're a bank executive, has increased. And that can still be hurtful. And it can cause people to feel a lot in terms of the exposure for their families, for themselves. It can make them hesitant to share personal things about themselves at a time when we want people sharing personal things, because that's how you connect as humans. And so I think that's another complexity as you move into increasingly public figure senior roles.
Yeah, so everything that you just said resonates so much with me. And there's this, I think, fallacy that the higher you go, the more quote control you have over things, and over certain things, sure. But there's a dependency to work horizontally to enable, and the stuff you're trying to affect is broader. And any way you cut it, you're collaborating, but it is lonely, right? It is lonely to find that peer set. And going back to where you started on the self-talk, you still actually need the confidence boost. You need the add a girl moments. Like you need it as fuel and as women, but you just can't find it. And you're expected to draw from this well from within, which can't always happen. And so everything you said completely resonates. And I know that Margaret, in your case, you've grown up in an industry that is so male dominated. And on this program, we've talked about the scarcity of women in STEM. I'm in the same space, and the struggles up that ladder. And yet here you are. And what is it you had to believe to get to where you are? And what did you have to call it, recast or reframe in order to survive as a woman in tech?
Let me first say that I so resonate with the self-talk and lonely. That never goes away. So it's finding different avenues and different groups. It's not always about your sisters and your cousins, but it's finding the people that will tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. That I always look for that community to keep me grounded. But to your question, Laurie, on recasting and reframing, I think one of the things that best helped me was the day I almost got fired. So I spent 7 amazingly wonderful years at SAP in Canada, and I learned so much, and it was a phenomenal organization to be a part of. But one day the president called me in and said, "We're about to fire you because we don't think this is working for you, and we don't think it's working for us either. So I'm going to give you a challenge to see if you can, together we can change, or let's just call it quits." And that was a big moment for me, and it was reframing with the gut punch, because that was a big gut punch. And so Mark and I talked about it, and a lot of it was that I was not, in his view, being front stage enough. He knew I had lots of ideas, but in large group settings, I was not expressing those views. And in that still male-dominated world of technology, too many people spend their time thinking about what they're going to say next and how they're going to interrupt, rather than be listening and be thoughtful about what others are saying. And so the key thing I learned, because I said, I'm all in and I'm going to work on this, because I knew I had to reframe and reset. And the biggest learning that I use to this day is to always ask myself, what would I do if I was not afraid? Because intuitively, I generally know what the answer is, and generally have ideas that are as good, if not better, than most people in the room. And so a key skill I learned was to ask that question, and then in large settings, either have an opinion within the first 5 minutes, or wait till the end, but then it better be the best opinion ever in the room, because then it's too late. So that was a big reframe and a reset as to how I showed up, that really reset my career.
That's profound. Like that, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Because it's very freeing. It takes you out of the moment and out of your container that is yourself, and puts you on a grander stage. And it's like, to hell with all of what's around me. But if I draw on everything within me, I could be this, I could say this, I could show up like that. I could, unapologetically grab the reins. And it's, wow, I popped it in the thread that people are loving that statement. So thank you for that wisdom. Alex, sometimes, as you know all too well, we set out to do things in life, and life has just other plans for us. and all the things we thought we were slated to go about doing get kind of put on ice. And I know this was true for you at one point in your life. Can you share with us what that pivot was?
Sure. So it started with retirement planning. And I know we hear these words all the time, but everyone is going to retire at some point. It's like death and taxes. It's going to happen. And I'm constantly surprised, or I had been constantly surprised at how surprised people were when their turn came to retire, and make room for, other people within the organization. So I really felt that it was better to be proactive and prepared. And I also did not want BMO to tap me on the shoulder and say, we don't want you anymore. It was a real driver for me that I wanted to control this. And so I openly planned for the date. I talked to the bank 2 years actually before I actually retired, said, here's the date. And I wanted to be psychologically ready as well. And I needed that time to gear up to, okay, you're going to have a life without this organization to support you. What's that going to be like? And also my husband and I, Dave, wanted to be young enough to enjoy travel. We love to travel, and I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of traveling. We wanted to do more, and we also knew that physically this wasn't going to get better, so we better do it sooner rather than later. So it was really planned for, and that date came. Unfortunately, 3 months prior to my retirement, my husband of 40 years passed away. And so all of a sudden, all of those plans that we had and all of those dreams that we had, I had to rethink the whole thing and rethink what's my purpose going to be now. And so, and then I have to add that 3 months after he passed away, we were in the throes of the COVID pandemic and lockdown. And so those three things all happened. So it wasn't a great 6 months of my life, I can tell you that. But I had two choices. And one was crawl into the safety of my bed. And what I will tell you about grief is what I've learned, sometimes you still need to crawl into bed. Like you have to give yourself that time and permission and not feel badly about it. And then the second thing was not only let go of my husband of 40 years, but the dreams and the plans that went with them was also a loss that sometimes you don't think about. So I had to reassess where my life was going to go. I had to answer the questions: what do I want to continue in my life the way I'm living it today? What do I want to change in my life, and how I'm going to move forward as I create the new reality for myself without work, without Dave. And as I said a minute ago, what's my new purpose? And that's a big void when your purpose has been work. So anyway, I'm just sharing that with you. That was a pivot in my life that I'm happy that phase is over, and I'm living as happily as I can.
You know, it takes an enormous amount of courage to say what you just said. So I deeply appreciate your willingness to share it. And you're going to see in the chat thread, everybody is so sorry for your loss. And I know it's hard to scrape it together and just present. So I'm not going to spend too much time there as we chatted about. But I remember talking to you when Dave was diagnosed, and ongoing as you navigated your new life. I also knew people who'd suffered loss of a spouse even. And I couldn't help but notice the different choices you made throughout. They were wildly courageous, and they began with one word. So tell us about that one word.
Well, the one word is yes. And so I decided that I was going to say yes to anything that anybody invited me to. And I'm here today because I said yes. So there you go. I'm still doing it. And it reframed my perspective on everything. And what I've done since I've been saying yes is I've been to South Africa, I've been to Amsterdam, I've been to Belgium, I've gone to London on trips to see plays because a friend will call me up and say, hey, there's this great play playing in the West End, do you want to go? And I say yes. And fortunately, I'm able to do that, and I thank BMO for that. So I can say yes to a lot of things. The other thing I really consciously said yes to was staying interested in things. U of T and Ryerson have a fantastic continuing education program. I've taken painting classes through them, British Garden architecture. I'm a huge fan of right now. I want to go and do a tour to see some of that live. I've started yoga classes because somebody said, do you want to do yoga? And I was like, yes, though I've never done it in my life. Now every day. I'm meditating every day. I've really transformed how I'm living my life, and it's not what I planned for, but it's okay, and it's actually good. So say yes, that's my message.
Oh, yeah, you got a lot of yeses in the thread. Oh my God. Like I remember this because it was like, where's Waldo? I'd call you up and be like, where's Alex? Well, actually I'm going fly fishing. I'm doing this, I'm taking yoga. And I'm like, it was actually hilarious because I never knew how she was gonna answer. And she's a hard woman to get a hold of in the middle of a pandemic because she's off doing stuff. And it was unbelievable, right? So I think it's just a good mantra, generally speaking, when you find yourself in a rut. But wow, like what an inspirational story and way to approach your life. And I'm going to pivot gears for 1 second because through ElleExcel, we've explored this idea of what makes each of us remarkable. And as a hallmark for self-confidence, as a nod to all that we are and what we do, and as hard as it is to say, I get it's hard, what makes you remarkable, Mona?
So first of all, thanks for asking this question. And I was reflecting on, I felt uncomfortable thinking about it as I was preparing for today, which is a great reflection that you highlighted, Lori, that we have to be more comfortable with the confidence building of ourselves. So I think the words I'd use are kindness, empathy. I think I'm a good friend, mother, leader. I think there's a lot of common qualities there in terms of just deep interest in others, curiosity, wanting to celebrate others' accomplishments, taking note of them. And I'm very curious. I love learning new things. I have an ambition about seeing things change. And I think the curiosity and ambition has been helpful to me in business, in charitable work, and fundraising, in terms of those aspects of my life, and even learning new sports or hobbies.
Amazing. Margaret, what makes you remarkable?
It's so wonderful to hear so many of the same themes resonate. I'm actually going to bring the two together with the story. When I was thinking about remarkable, listening is huge, kindness, empathy, curiosity is big for me, and an openness to constantly reinvent, and also saying yes. So my favorite say yes story is a few years ago. An Irish foundation found me in Toronto and asked me to come and share my story to a group of new Canadians. And I went and shared my story, and they found it interesting. But by saying yes to that, they came back 6 months later and said, we have the opportunity to interview the two-time ex-president of Ireland. She's just written a biography, and we'd like you to interview her. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. And I was saying yes. And so because I said yes to that, I had this phenomenal opportunity open up to me, which was one of the biggest honors of my life. And I did the interview and I left, and somehow one of my Irish friends who lives in Pennsylvania tuned in, and she called me, she said, your mother would be so proud of you. I just lost it. And it was such a beautiful story, but it was all because you say yes. And so I really do encourage folks to do that. It's wonderful.
I love that. It's the conduit to the next place. Alex, what makes you remarkable?
Well, I'm kind of dreading this question because what I've decided is I'm not remarkable. I wrote down some words. I am disciplined. I'm a hard worker, and I'm responsible. But then I think, well, most people are those things. So I have to say, I was talking to my daughter, Georgia, beginning of the week. I said, they've asked me this question. I don't have an answer. I'm really stumped. I'm going to have to make something up. And she immediately said, well, I think you're remarkable. And it just stopped me. And I said, well, that's the nicest thing I've ever heard in my life from one of my children. And she said that she felt I was remarkable because, oh, I'm getting emotional, because I had a successful career and I was able to be a great mom. And she said, the way I have 3 kids, she said, the way we feel about you now tells us that you didn't have to sacrifice being the mother you wanted to be and being the banker you wanted to be. So she thinks I'm remarkable, then I'm remarkable. That's it.
I mean, isn't that where all the rubber hits the road, right? It's like you show up and you do what you want to do when you leave, but you're there for all the people that you love. And to be able to do all of that is remarkable. And I laughed because you were texting me going, I don't know what the hell. I'm going to ask you this question. I don't know what the hell makes me remarkable. What am I supposed to say? Is it this? Is it that? And it was this banter back. I was killing myself laughing. And then I laughed when you finally sent across the one and said, I got it. My daughter told me what it is that makes me remarkable. But oh my God, there is a list of things, and you only scratch the surface. So I know there's many folks that know you on the line, and they'll pop in there what makes Alex remarkable. But that is most certainly an accomplishment. So thanks for sharing. It is hard to say, right? We did a whole program where we actually tried to voice over the remarkable things, and it started. Let me just say, for all of us, it started with self-deprecation. It's like, well, I'm good at this. However, Susie's better at that. Or, I don't really know, but my friend said. And you got to laugh because in the research, it actually shows that our counterparts, it meant they're quite comfortable saying, you know what, well, I'm doing this. I kill it at these things. And unabashedly, to their credit, feel comfortable saying it on average relative to women. And so it's a bit of a practice, right? And it's as much for the external audience to convey, hey, I'm all that in a bag of chips. I'm an analytical empath, which is what I think is remarkable of me. I put that out there, but it's as much for the masses as it is for me, because every time I say it, there's a part of me that takes root. And the tree gets that much bigger and stronger and deeper. And so kudos to you for coming up with the words. I know there are many others. And I'm going to switch gears for a moment and talk about bias. So from what makes you remarkable to navigating bias. So Mona, switching gears, I wanted to talk about this because many of us want to believe that it just doesn't exist, right? We want to think that it exists less, or we develop coping mechanisms, maybe let's say, to manage through it. We suit up in like our Teflon jackets and we convince ourselves that, it doesn't matter. More and more as I speak to women who've progressed through the ranks, myself included, every one of them has a story of bias or facing bias or managing through it or managing through those setbacks. And some have faced microaggressions and sometimes just straight up overt aggression. And I wanted to ask you, was this true for you? What'd you do about it? And what'd you learn?
Okay, so first of all, yes, bias exists. It still exists. And I think it will always exist. And we ourselves have it. Like I have biases based on my upbringing, my beliefs, their lenses that we see things through, or organizations end up because we're collections of people, but then have systemic biases in them. And you do things to mitigate against that, like having multi-factor people do hiring, multi-inputs for promotion, those types of things. To mitigate against, but you still have bias. Have I experienced it? Absolutely. And I actually have learned something from it that is a strategy directly that I use. I had a fantastic mentor that told me this early in my career, and it's been a huge help, and I'll share it today. And this one is around some of the differences in terms of men and women communication styles, in particular in North America, in business settings. And perceptions commonly held when women are being more aggressive about it being bossy and assertive. And so I become a lot more attuned to how do I ensure that I'm demonstrating behaviors that are kind of broadly felt as leadership behaviors. This links a bit to Margaret's story in terms of when she had her boss say, you're not speaking up enough about these ideas, as opposed to she was probably holding space for others to speak. That is a classic male-female communication element. And so what my mentor said is, while you may want the world to shift, it's not going to shift tomorrow. So what you need to do is adapt yourself and be able to demonstrate these kinds of behaviors in different settings with different audiences that you're part of. So I really worked a lot on my voice tone, making sure that it doesn't go up at an end of a sentence. How grounded, because I tend to have a bit of a natural squeaky voice. So that's how I speak, the pace at which I speak, how I take space in a room when I sit down, to take more space. You mentioned, Lori, when you described in my introduction, you picked out things in terms of presence in a room. Those are things I've been working on for 25 years. So actually it warmed my heart that you noticed them. But those are things that a mentor told me, hugely helpful when you think about the natural biases for female leaders in North America and what you want to dial up and be a little bit more assertive and demonstrate.
I love that. And the good thing is they're learned behavior, and many are communication skills related and things that allow, because I think 90% of what we absorb is what we see. And we've had on this program, and we'll do another one, but a communications double click, and it talked about the differences with male and female communication and some of the mastery around those just straight up techniques to be able to have greater influence, to connect deeper with people, and to be able to navigate whatever bias is in the room. And I like that you started with the fact that it's everywhere. This is not no war against men. It's us trying to show up and be our best and influence change and lead and have the kind of impacts we want to have in the world and have full lives, but make space for ourselves and indicate to people that, you know what, you need to also make space for me. So I love that. And, you know, Margaret, I'm sure being a woman in tech, you face bias. I've been in this space too, and the nature of it has also evolved, right? Hasn't it? Over time, it's changed. And when you started out, can I ask you what bias looked like? And then how did it sound? How did it feel? And what's it look like now?
When I started out, I remember in my early years in Pennsylvania, I was the leading sales rep. And I remember going to a 100% club chairman circle. And I remember the president saying, now, can everybody who made it to this great event please stand up to be recognized? And then he followed it up with, and can all the wives who supported people to get here please stand up to be acknowledged? And I remember that was my first gut punch of, oh my goodness, this bias exists. Now, yes, this was a few decades ago, and we've come so far. But you know, we all do have our biases, and they're everywhere. One of the most recent ones that I've challenged my team with is that in our environment in tech, we're a fast-growing company, and we have cohorts that kind of all grew up together in this rocket ship. But that leads to some age bias of everybody in this particular team tends to be in a similar age. And I'm a huge believer that age diversity is so important. Personally, how I've dealt with initially being the only woman in the room, now being one still of a few women in the room, and I know you have this as well, Lori, I kind of use it as, how am I going to make myself stand out? I'm going to be remembered because I am the only female in the room, because I show up differently. And I try to use it as a differentiator, not as a reason not to be there or to show up differently, but to actually differentiate. And that's really helped me over the years. And sometimes I have the self-talk going into those rooms. I'm here because I belong here, but I'm going to be memorable because I'm going to stand out, and everyone's going to remember that 5'1" female showed up.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. Well, 5'2" right here. I think if there's a relationship, maybe it's correlated or perhaps causal between height and strength. I like to think there is, because some days I feel rather mighty. All right, so Alex, you know, not long ago we attended a meeting together, and I was on the receiving end of, I'll just say, I'll call it what it is. It was like a public rant and a dressing down in that moment. And there was nothing micro about the aggression. I was surrounded by colleagues and members of my own leadership team. I sat quietly and I took it in. I was affronted, honestly, and I processed kind of the inaccuracies in the moment while trying not to breathe fire or break down. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Was I going to come out and get fired in that moment because I was so aggressive, or was I going to shell up. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do. But I scraped through it. And while I'll never forget the exchange, what I do remember more is actually the conversation with you after, where you checked in and you came around to find me in your quiet way and worked to build me back up and encourage me to address the difficult situation and honor what I felt in that moment. And at the time, I got to tell you, I didn't recognize it as advocacy. Because I was in a room and with many bystanders and nobody was in that ring with me. They all stood at the sidelines. But now I see it as just that. I see it as advocacy and encouragement, and you're giving me the strength to address the bias. So I really thank you for that. I know we've talked about that before. But why is it so important to you personally to support other women? And what do you really hope for women at work and the women as part of your life? If you were to fast forward into the future, what do you hope for them?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we can always ask ourselves, do we help each other enough? And that's about helping other women, but helping men too. I don't think that matters what gender you are. Are we sometimes too focused on a bottom line or a promotion or showing up and how I show up? And I think that's just an important question to always keep asking ourselves is, are we helping each other make this organization as successful as it can be? And I was thinking about promotions that I've had along the way in my career. And then finally, when I was made a group head in the US, I was afraid to ask for help. I was afraid that if I asked, questions even, that it would be perceived as a weakness. Like, well, I should know these things. So, at home, alone in a Chicago apartment, because I was in the US without my family, I was like, oh my God, like I'm in over my head. Do I deserve this promotion? Do I deserve this position? Actually, what the hell is the position? I didn't really know what I was supposed to do. And then, presenting at board meetings. Mona, you got to help sort this out. Like I had to present at more board meetings in the US, then Canada, then risk meetings. I didn't have a clue what the purpose was for each one. And it took me a long time to sort it out. And it was on me too, because I was afraid to ask, but I didn't know who to ask. And so anyway, I'm just sharing that, my experience and how I felt. Now, obviously, I figured it out, but, I would have caused much less pain for myself if I had just had the courage and the self-confidence, to reach out to my peers and say, can you help me understand how do I present this? What is this board looking for? As an example. So, if we see people that look a bit lost or have had a bad run at a meeting, it doesn't take much, or it doesn't take long to just, put your arm around them and say, hey, I'm with you here. How do we make sure this doesn't happen this way again? Or just moral support is great sometimes.
Yeah, and that is such an important point, the advocacy. And I think, and I'd said this in the video that you saw at the top of the hour, there's room for all of us at the table. And when one woman succeeds, it creates the perception and favorable bias that we all can. And so you're there in that room saluting her to be at her best, like whatever signal you can give her. I often will do that, like just kind of, we got you, or you got you, and I'm here. And even though she might choose to take it in whatever direction she wishes, she's got an ally around the table. Because she shows up at that table, as you're all talking about. You show up there with self-doubt most often. So the war is within you, and then there's a war around you sometimes. And the last thing you need is another woman at the table putting you down. You don't need anyone to put you down, frankly. You want support, but you don't always get it. And I would just not underestimate the power of a wink, the power of a salute. Yeah, that's a good point. Like the small the smile, the telling her you look great as they show up, because it soaks in, right? It causes swagger, which is good. You want that. You need that fuel, right, as you step up to that table. So thank you for giving that to me. It matters greatly. It gave me the fuel to have the conversation that needed to happen and to soldier on, right, and to learn from it. And so I'm going to turn to this idea of what's a women's circle. It's related to what we're talking about, and it's all about bringing together a constellation of support. I've called it on this program a power pack, but it includes not only people in your power pack, but what else do you do to feel whole and centered and well? It's the things that you need in order to have the appropriate support just show up. And Mona, what's your power pack? What's in there?
Well, there's definitely people. So deep friends that give me joy when I talk to them or call them. My mom would be in that group, you know, a quick 2-minute call during the day and the boost. Affirmations have been one of mine for about 25 years. You know, when we didn't have iPhones, it used to be my notebook, and I would write in the front of the notebook affirmations. And now with an iPhone, I put them in. Just actually this week, we had a speaker with the Female Women Alliance that was so powerful, Odessa Jenkins, and she did exactly that at the start of our session. She basically fed to us affirmations, and it started with, you know, you are worthy. Like, you are lovable, you are capable. And it just, for me, it reminded me how powerful it is. So it's a technique I've used as part of my power pack. I think it is so incredibly powerful. And whether it's before you go into a meeting or after you come out of a conversation that's been really difficult or challenging, in any aspect of your life. The other aspect of Power Pack for me is movement, and that can be as small as literally breath work between meetings. Can take no more than 90 seconds around breathing, to making sure I'm getting movement to the work I do with yoga and Pilates. And so, because it truly is like it grounds me, and it brings me back to thinking clearly about things, which sometimes I lose in the emotion of things or the tasks that I have.
Amazing. Thanks, Margaret. What's in your power pack?
My power pack also has affirmations, and I have the same affirmation for about 20 years. And I've actually never shared it before, but I'm going to share it, which is, I'm a soft, honest woman, easily fulfilling my life dreams, sharing joy, and accepting loving. So that, I don't know why I shared that, but I just did, because it has worked so beautifully for me as I go through the ups and downs of life and what it brings you. And it's so grounding for me. The other thing that grounds me a lot is finding that group of friends that I laugh a lot with. And that is so important to me. And I have a group of about 9 friends, and we'll go somewhere in the world twice a year, and we just laugh a lot. So I encourage everybody to take the time to do that. And so that's really important. And family is very important to me, and also being outdoors. Being out there with Fiona, my dog, that's a lot of my grounding in life, is long walks with Fiona. And that's really wonderful and very, very important to me.
Love that. You saw Fiona on the quote reel. Alex, what's in your power pack?
Well, first I have to share my affirmation for about the last 30 years is, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And I still live by that. Refueling me comes from my supportive friends and my children, and I don't take them for granted. I make sure I make time to reach out to them and be there for them when they need me. I have 2 little dogs that are like, I'm embarrassed to say how much I love them. And so anytime I feel like I need a boost, giving them a kiss always makes me feel better. And I play the piano. So I'm a musician. Actually, from my first kind of education was a pianist, and music always makes me happy. Whether it's playing the piano or putting music on, it always gives me a boost.
Wow, good tips. And it's interesting, right? Affirmations is such a perpetual theme among the 3 of you, and for those on the line too, myself included. I read them every morning. It's pasted into my gratitude journal. So maybe we'll do a session on that, because I think sometimes it seems like a rather vague thing, like you're not quite sure how to get your head around it, and you really got to find one that resonates with you. I'm going to skip ahead a wee bit and chat a little bit about wellness at work in a more formal way. And Mona, I'm going to go to you for a moment. And I know that wellness is a huge part of your life. What prompts you to place such high value in health? What do you do for your own health day to day? And how do you manage it with a full slate of work you have accountability for?
So I do believe mental and physical health is critical to do anything. And just I'm a fact-based person, so it's the science around it. Like, you know, you mentioned some great tips. If you're not drinking enough water, you're going to end up with headache and feel tired. If you're not eating well, it will drain your energy. If you're drinking wine, you're probably not sleeping well. Or if you're in your 50s and drinking wine, you're probably not sleeping well if you have menopause. And so really being aware of the things that are contributing to your energy up and energy down. And my belief is everything that you do during the day and every encounter you have is either building your energy, keeping it neutral, or depleting it. So what can you be doing to help build your energy if you want to have lots of energy to live your life? And it's not just for work, it's the whole day. It's not just using all your energy in the work day and then you go home and you crash. So it's the idea of how do you keep energy for all the things that you want to do in life. And so water consumption, huge. Caffeine, I love coffee, so I do consume caffeine, but I only have 2 and never after 10 o'clock. I also do like wine, but I consume only 3 nights a week because I also care about sleep and it directly relates my sleep. Movement isn't just exercise. Movement for me is thinking about every 90 minutes of every day. It can be a small walk, it can be breath work, it can be stretching that I step away from my desk to do. So thinking about movement all the time, things that bring me joy. So it could be looking at a photograph on my desk, reading an affirmation, calling a friend or my mom during the day because I know it's going to give me a boost and I'm just going to feel so great. Managing that energy and not letting 6 hours go by where I haven't done one of those things because I know it's going to impact how I feel. And then the other is just forgiveness of self. We're not perfect. Nothing is about perfection. And, you know, we're getting better. Maybe one day didn't work so well, maybe. And so just that sense of forgiving yourself a bit and starting from wherever you are in terms of what can you take to improve your wellness and learn about, like, there's an enormous science. And I love, Lori, how much you've dedicated through these programs to learning more about it. Our bodies, there's a science around them, and knowing more about it really helps you keep your body in strong form.
Yeah, it sure does. Without it, there's nothing else. And so, yeah, I get you on that when I hear you. And I'm going to just ask you, Alex, and then you, Margaret, what are 2 things that you do just quickly to care for yourself? So, Alex?
Yeah, the one thing that has really changed how I feel is meditation. And so I used to make fun of people that meditated, actually. But now I realize it forces me to slow down. It forces me to really be grounded. So I meditate daily, and I walk my dogs twice a day. So I am walking a minimum of 6 kilometers a day because they need me. So it forces me to get up and out. And no matter how I'm feeling when I leave the house, I always feel better when I get back. So it's partly what you said too, Margaret. Fresh air and just being out are the 2 things that I do.
Yeah, I spent a year learning about meditation and I could not stay awake. So I basically spent a year napping and then learned to actually formally meditate. So, Margaret, just a couple things real quick on what you do to care for yourself.
Sleep is my number one, and getting enough of it. After that, I'm totally going to echo Alex. Walking the dog is so important and it's so rejuvenating for me. I'm a terrible meditator, but I force myself to put something on for 5 to 10 minutes a day. And I know when I do, it helps, but I'm still learning how to do it. But I know it helps.
Good discipline. All right, now for women to excel, what do you think we need to stop doing and start doing? Margaret, continue with you, then Mona, then Alex.
I mean, I think we are excelling. So sometimes I don't think we give enough credit for the things that we do very well. I think what we need to continue doing is sponsor each other when we're not in the room and constantly ask ourselves, what would we do if we were not afraid? They're my 2.
Love that. Mona, what we need to start doing and stop doing?
So stop doing, watch the talk track that's going on in our own mind. Wash the things that are negative thoughts. find actual strategies to put positive thoughts in. Affirmations is a great one that we've used today, and it's evidence-based that it works.
Love it. Alex, start and stop.
So I'm going to stop with, I think we need to stop questioning whether we're good enough or smart enough. And I think we need to start following what expands your heart and brings us joy.
All right. Well, now, I don't know about you, but I feel hopeful. I feel more grounded. I feel like my gang just expanded here. I feel affirmed, and this burgeoning community just got bigger and stronger on account of you ladies on the screen. It takes courage to put yourself out there, to share the great stuff and the crappy stuff and all of that in between and the things that nobody really tells us about. And you've helped us validate our feelings, my own feelings, and give us tips to navigate paths forward in very practical ways and human ways. So thank you for trailblazing and for your humanity. And I really appreciate it. Thank you.